think a really cool thing is that NASA uses liquid hydrogen as rocket fuel, and they've used it for, since the 60s. It's not technically that new of a concept, using liquid hydrogen as a fuel. It's just new as a widely used fuel. So if they can make it work sending a rocket into space, then I think we could do it here on Earth.
Hydrogen is a promising alternative fuel that could help decarbonize transportation in BC. But public skepticism and safety concerns are slowing down adoption. Are these concerns warranted? Or is misinformation getting in the way of progress? With the right applications, knowledge, and momentum, hydrogen will help us reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. But we've got a few hurdles to overcome to get there.
I'm Jeanette Jackson, CEO of Foresight Canada and your host of Cleantech Forward. On today's episode, we're talking to experts about how hydrogen fits into BC's clean energy future, what works now, what's holding us back, and what it will take to scale adoption. That's all coming up in just a moment.
Welcome to Cleantech Forward. This season, we're exploring the challenges, opportunities, and real-world solutions shaping the future of British Columbia's clean transportation. Join us as we talk to leaders and innovators working to accelerate BC's path to a net zero economy, one that benefits people, planet, and profits. From electric buses and tugboats to alternative fuels and shared infrastructure, buckle up for an electrifying ride into the future. Powered by Foresight Canada's BC Net Zero Innovation Network.
At Foresight Canada, we help the world do more with less sustainably. The BC Net Zero Innovation Network is a first-of-its-kind ecosystem platform that accelerates the adoption of clean technologies throughout BC's top industries. Clean air, clean water, clean transportation. A net zero economy starts here.
Hydrogen isn't new. It's been used for over 100 years. And today, it's a promising alternative fuel in the push towards carbon neutrality. But like any new clean tech, the promise of hydrogen does not come without its challenges. Someone who's familiar with this delicate dance is Alyssa Kelly. She's the Director of Research at Foresight and sees firsthand what's being tried and tested in the clean tech ecosystem, including hydrogen.
I'm really excited about our conversation today because it's with a very own Foresight team member, Alyssa Kelly, who is our Director of Everything Research, which the team does a lot of work on, and Alyssa heads up that team.
Thanks, Jeanette. So a bit about the research that we do at Foresight. It ultimately comes from our experience as an accelerator. So, we have this deep knowledge of the clean tech ecosystem from our close interaction with ventures and private and public sector end users across the country from our years of working. And from that, we know their strengths and their needs and, the how and the why behind the challenges and opportunities in clean tech. So the research that we specialize in typically contributes this, what we say is foundational clean tech sector knowledge to the ecosystem, ultimately with the goal of driving and breaking down barriers to technology adoption.
So let's dig in with a specific fuel like hydrogen, so an alternative fuel, but it has faced some skepticism from the public and industry despite proven benefits. Why do you think that is?
So I think there are a lot of factors to this. There's a lot of misconceptions about hydrogen. It can be a complex subject to fully understand, and there's a lot of nuances to it. When we're talking about hydrogen, we're not advocating for an entire world based on hydrogen. We're advocating for hydrogen to be a tool in the toolbox of a low carbon or decarbonized society. And so when you think about what that actually means, if we want to move away from fossil fuels, because obviously they release CO2 emissions when combusted, which are greenhouse gases, and too many greenhouse gases cause climate change. But there's other benefits as well to moving away from fossil fuels that I think people tend to forget about, besides just the impact on the climate. So, if you were to say, looking at using hydrogen in a fuel cell electric vehicle, the only exhaust that comes out is water. Fuel cell EVs are also much quieter than a traditional internal combustion engine too. So hypothetically, if we were imagining a low carbon city in the future that only uses hydrogen or other low carbon transportation technologies, and what that would actually look like. It would be much cleaner. It would be quieter. It would be really impactful on human health as well. I think a really cool thing is that NASA uses liquid hydrogen as rocket fuel, and they've used it for, since the 60s. It's not technically that new of a concept, using liquid hydrogen as a fuel. It's just new as a widely used fuel. So if they can make it work, sending a rocket into space, then I think we could do it here on Earth.
T-minus 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The benefits of hydrogen are compelling, but questions around safety, cost, and infrastructure are still slowing progress. Is it safe? Is it viable? Is it going to solve all our problems? The answers, like many in the clean transportation space, are nuanced.
One of the biggest misconceptions I think that is contributing to this is around safety. So people still use that dreaded Hindenburg line, which I'm sorry for even repeating now, that it's highly explosive, which it is, but I don't think people realize how commonly hydrogen is already used, produced, transported, and so on and so forth already today for industrial purposes. So we do know how to handle it and transport it safely. Another way that people are sort of, I guess, skeptical about hydrogen is that it can be seen as greenwashing. I think people are unsure about the actual environmental and climate impact of hydrogen for its use as a fuel. And I think they think it can be a distraction from investment in renewable energy and electrification. There's also, some challenges that come to using hydrogen as a transport fuel. So, for example, infrastructure that's needed is not common. We don't have ubiquitous hydrogen fueling stations everywhere. Producing low carbon hydrogen can be energy intensive and costly as well. And this can make ROI uncertain and create some hesitancy from investors and people who are, potentially considering it. What I can say is ultimately there are benefits to hydrogen's use as an energy carrier or a fuel. It can make sense as a complementary technology to electrification in the transport sector, but the feasibility and economics and rationale for its use in one region and in one certain situation might not make sense for another region or another industry. So it's really not a one-size-fits-all solution. And so when it comes to skepticism, I think that can be healthy because it's not the solution for everything, right? Like we should question things and whether they're effective. But I think people miss the point that it is very nuanced and there's a lot of factors to consider. And it's just one tool in our decarbonization toolbox. It's not going to solve everything, but it can play a role. And it's okay for us to have a suite of solutions that aren't perfect on their own.
Hydrogen might not solve everything, but it is a vital piece of the clean transportation puzzle. A BC-based company called H-Tech is working to address some of the misconceptions and barriers preventing us from experiencing hydrogen's full potential. Norm Barmeier, H-Tech's Director of Compliance and Design Authority, is leading efforts to make hydrogen fuel solutions both real and reliable.
I certainly look forward to the opportunity to share my passion for hydrogen and the work that we're doing. Specifically, my role at H-Tech as a director of compliance is to oversee, all the different requirements that come into play from a regulatory perspective, from a technical perspective, and then from a risk and safety perspective.
That's so exciting. It's great to see that H-Tech's allocated resources to work with customers on making sure that everything's, meeting all those regulatory requirements.
We want to help the municipalities and help the regulators also feel safe about our technology. And so we're there helping them introduce this new tech into their communities.
H-Tech is a pioneer in driving hydrogen technology forward in BC. It builds clean hydrogen production facilities and critical infrastructure like fueling and distribution centers. It also helps transition medium and heavy-duty fleets to hydrogen-fueled power.
We built the very first station on Granville and 71st, which was actually the very first gas station in BC. We partnered with Shell, and we ended up building the very first hydrogen station in the country on that site, right? And as soon as we built that station and opened it up, the OEMs, Toyota, put cars on the road. So that's that first sort of, partnership where we see us and the car suppliers coming together. Now we have 7 stations open to the public, right? So it's gotten a momentum in the sense that we've made it real, and we now have hundreds of vehicles on the street that we support. And we are currently in construction on our first proper heavy-duty station at Tsawwassen with the Tsawwassen First Nation. So we're really proud about that, and we've opened our first production facility. So we've got this ecosystem going now where we produce, we distribute, we sell, and we have vehicles on the road.
Norm and the H-Tech team are taking education seriously, recognizing that a significant challenge of getting more vehicles on the road involves educating the public about how hydrogen fuel works and addressing misconceptions.
When we think about alternatives like hydrogen, what type of skepticism is being faced from, the public, and how do you overcome that with the benefits?
Well, I think part of it is, there's still a lot of educating that we need to do. When people talk about a battery electric vehicle or a fuel cell electric vehicle, they're almost identical. In one case, the electrons are coming from a battery. In the other case, the electrons are coming from hydrogen, right? And that's really it. The drivetrain's the same, the vehicle's the same. And the upside is that we're trying to create a customer experience that's similar to the conventional fueling experience. You pull up to a dispenser, maybe you spend 3 or 4 minutes there filling up your car, and then you leave and you're on your way. Our vehicles perform the same way that a conventional vehicle does. And I think folks just need to see more of that, and understand that it's a very available option. It's a safe technology. It's been around for over 100 years. There's well-established codes and standards in the regulatory space. The fuel cell vehicles are on the road. We have hundreds of them out there, people driving them today, and they have been since 2018. They're very modern and normal-looking vehicles, right? And they're quiet. They don't produce any sound, so they reduce, your stress when you're driving. And the only thing coming out of the tailpipe is water. It couldn't be any cleaner. It's the purest form of energy. I love it. It's such a beautiful molecule. It's a simple, pure molecule that we borrow. We literally just borrow it and then we give it back. I don't know. I can't say enough about how beautiful I think that energy cycle is, that hydrogen energy cycle, and how clean it is.
Despite Norm's confidence, there is still work to be done in building public trust in hydrogen. That's why he's going the extra kilometer, filling information gaps and building awareness with support from Foresight's BC Net Zero Innovation Network.
I can't underestimate, even from our broader Cleantech perspective, the amount of effort that goes into messaging the benefits of new technologies and what's possible and available today, not 10 years, but today, to really drive productivity, drive sustainability, and drive competitiveness of our industry and our infrastructure. But you're taking a lead on that with, the Hydrogen Safety and Awareness campaign.
People need to see proof of concept. They need to see the thing happening in the real world. And that's what we're doing, right? And sure, we've faced challenges. There's skepticism at every level. And so that's been our job, is to pioneer in that space, right? And create a functioning hydrogen ecosystem in BC as an example of how it can be done. One of the key things is, we're subject matter experts when it comes to the technology. We understand that piece, but translating that to a digestible curriculum or digestible material that we can share, that's key. We hope to be messengers of a really tangible, practical, solution that we have in place, and that's real. And getting support in that space is invaluable.
Yeah, every technology pathway, whether we like it or not, starts with some level of skepticism, right? Like, who would have thought we'd have satellites? Who would have thought we had the basic cell phone? So, all those big companies started with a vision, and it came with skepticism. And now, some of the leading companies globally, right?
Well, we're such a passionate group. We're like, let's just make it. Let's just make it happen. Let's just do it. Let's just go all in on this, right? And it totally worked. I'm so proud of what we've done, honestly.
Exciting things are happening in BC to demonstrate and support the viability of hydrogen as an alternative fuel. Norm believes a key to hydrogen's progress is focusing on nurturing the entire ecosystem, including fuel supply, infrastructure, and technology.
We believe firmly in the ecosystem model. So we're not only building stations, we're partnering with the vehicle OEMs to bring cars on as we open stations. We have our own distribution network from our own production facilities that's making our hydrogen. And we're now leaning into heavy-duty fleet leasing programs. So we own and maintain fleet vehicles or heavy-duty trucks for fleet operators to lease from us. And it's really key that those trucks get on the road and people see them. They're badged with hydrogen and H-Tech logos. And I think more people need to see these heavy-duty trucks in action on the road, and that'll help gain some confidence in that mobilization. We have a bunch of stations in different stages of design. We're working with municipalities on the island to expand our network over there, including production. We're looking to move north into northern BC and across into the interior to build another station out there for some redundancy. We're looking into the liquid side. There's hydrogen gas, but there's also liquefied hydrogen. And that's another opportunity for more dense storage and a bit more economy of scale. So yeah, there's lots of work ahead, and we've got our kind of eyes on all of it, right? We're trying to see how to stay ahead.
You can be an individual solving an individual problem, or you can, be the collaborator, the connector that brings everyone together to solve a bigger problem. And more people win. It's more effort to get it going, but it also, I think, has a much greater ripple effect, exponential growth and opportunity for more stakeholders when you take an ecosystem approach.
Yeah, 100%. And the ecosystem approach offers us insight into lots of data on the full life cycle, right? So we collect that data and we learn. We know where our hotspots are. We know where we need to spend more time and energy. It's a beautiful thing to have that full ecosystem and have all the eyes and ears on it. It puts us in a really strong position.
So when we think about, the future outlook for hydrogen and clean fuel alternatives, what steps need to happen to mainstream alternative fuels in BC to really, go at scale?
I think the work that we're doing with you in terms of getting material out there and marketing this and sharing our learnings is super valuable. We need to make the really technical stuff digestible for more people, right? That's one piece. In terms of boots on the ground initiatives, our heavy duty trucks need to get on the road and people need to see them. And the fleet operators need to just realize how awesome these trucks are. They're super strong. They're quiet. Imagine driving down the road. You don't smell any smells. You don't hear anything. You got these heavy duty trucks passing through your neighborhood in a silent way. So I firmly believe getting more vehicles on the road is key, and visibility of those trucks. We need to work with the light duty OEMs to bring some, to be frank, some sexier cars onto the road. There's lots of really cool cars being developed. BMW has a nice SUV that they're bringing onto the market in Europe that we hopefully will get our hands on in a year or two. Hyundai's got some really nice options, including pickup trucks, Toyota, Honda. They're all putting big money into this. I mean, that's a telling piece, right? If these global car manufacturers are actually building them and putting them out into the streets, that tells us a lot. And we want those vehicles to come here. So we need those hurdles removed, and we need to continue to build more stations and infrastructure so that they feel comfortable bringing the vehicles to market, so that they know that their customers are supported and well served. So it's that very integrated relationship. And any hurdles we can remove to make that happen, we welcome that.
While Norm and his team are educating the public and building BC's hydrogen ecosystem, Alyssa and the Foresight research team are focused on shaping strategy, identifying how co-locating supply and demand through regional hydrogen hubs can drive scale, accelerate adoption, reduce costs, and unlock local opportunities.
So we're running programs and doing research, and obviously a lot of the work that we're doing is breaking out into more bespoke or specific problem-focused activity, which is part of the BC Sempo Hydrogen Hub study focused on co-locating supply and demand. Do you want to sort of explain some of the opportunities that are possible with that plan and that strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, co-locating supply and demand in a hub model is a strategy that's sort of pretty commonly accepted across the globe as a method for advancing hydrogen economies to try and overcome these, I guess you could say, chicken and egg scenarios where both supply and demand of hydrogen need to grow, and there needs to be investment in both, but one needs the other to move forward in order to be considered viable. So it's sort of, you get locked in this stalemate of sorts. And the rationale is that co-locating hydrogen production and end use together, you can create a balanced market, lower infrastructure and transportation costs, hopefully optimize the use of resources, and then it also just stimulates the local economy where it is. So the BC government noted this model within the hydrogen strategy of 2021, and the Clean Energy and Major Projects Office, the Sempo, is working to implement this partnership with Foresight. So we're looking at the potential for hubs in 4 different regions across the province. We've completed the studies on the Lower Mainland and the Northeast, and we're currently doing these studies on Vancouver Island and the interior, so looking at both the Okanagan and the Kootenays regions.
Foresight's research shows that hydrogen isn't just promising for decarbonizing land-based transportation, it also holds potential on the water. Hydrogen is particularly well suited for powering BC's ports, where it's already being produced and transported, making them ideal hubs for both supply and demand. And in other parts of the province, existing natural gas infrastructure could be repurposed to support hydrogen distribution, creating even more opportunities for regional adoption.
So for the Lower Mainland, producing green hydrogen, so hydrogen produced from water through electrolysis and pyrolysis, which is also commonly known as turquoise hydrogen, make the most sense from a supply perspective for those regions. And in terms of demand, we have the presence of the Port of Vancouver. Leveraging hydrogen for shipping and port operations is a key opportunity that we identified there. Ports globally seem to be really key drivers of hydrogen development. If you look at places like, the Netherlands and the Port of Rotterdam, for example, having ports involved is really critical. So that's a key opportunity identified there. For the Northeast, I would say the abundance of natural gas favors natural gas as a feedstock. In addition to that, there's also the geology potential for carbon capture and storage there too. There was another study done by the BC government recently that indicated that. So producing what we would call blue hydrogen, which is matching hydrogen produced from natural gas with captured CO2 to make it low carbon, is also a possibility. And then the existing gas industry in the Northeast means there's also existing infrastructure that could be leveraged too. So pipelines potentially, and the workforce likely has a lot of relevant skills that could be built upon too.
Yeah. I like that you touched on sort of the workforce development, because the reality is adoption comes not when the decision maker makes a decision, but when the rest of the team within these large institutions, corporates, and communities are getting more comfortable with new technologies, or in this case, a new fuel supply, right? And I also think it's interesting, not sure if people are aware, but I think the current potential is that 15% of natural gas infrastructure can host hydrogen. I know the numbers are fluctuating and it's still a work in progress in terms of the research and where it'll take us, but to not have to build new infrastructure, to move around a cleaner fuel is definitely more important for adoption.
Absolutely. And the presence of infrastructure as well, like even if it's, you still have to build a new pipeline, just the fact that it's there and the communities are accepting of it and they're used to it is an advantage as well.
Whatever the fuel source, scaling clean tech takes collaboration from policymakers, industry and investors to innovators, academia, and municipalities. Foresight's Helix 5 model brings all those players to the table, helping drive smarter decisions and faster adoption.
I know in our work, you're doing a lot around ecosystem development around these technology pathways. And it's not only about education and technology, but how do we get people to work together, to collaborate, to move forward faster?
Collaboration's key, and we say that all the time at Foresight. When you talk about any given clean tech adoption barrier, it's really multifaceted, and it's often you need the input of more than one or even two groups. So bringing the ecosystem together, and that's the whole Helix 5. You're including First Nations and government and industry and innovators and researchers and academia and so on together to work collaboratively on overcoming barriers really brings all the perspectives needed to the table to be able to efficiently look at any given issue and understand the nuances of how a solution might affect every single group in a different way or overcome a barrier that's affecting different groups in the same way.
Something I think it's important to clarify for the audience is, what is the Helix 5? And it's a unique term to Foresight where we talk about the role that different stakeholders play in supporting innovation. So you've got the innovators themselves at the center of the Helix, and then around that, you have other key stakeholders. That's industry, government, capital, and academia. And each of them play a very key role. Industry in terms of adoption, capital in terms of funding the innovation, government in terms of
making sure that policy and regulatory environments are progressive to drive the adoption of innovation. And of course, academia, who not only supply talent, but they help make sure that we can vet and validate where innovation is going from a research lens. And hopefully through that convening, we can, like you said, come up with solutions and get that investment, going. And even people that may be across different party lines or, be a little more laggard in sort of that clean transportation development pathway, we can bring them along, right? When there's leadership and models of success and working together.
Absolutely.
Thinking about scaling up the deployment in BC as well, are there, one or two really strategic or unique things, activities that we could do or that need to be done to help with that?
Ultimately, the economics are key areas of concern. And for low carbon fuels to be able to compete with fossil fuels, there needs to be policy support. So incentives, pollution pricing, project funding, so on. Currently it's a time of political flux, and this is a contentious issue at the moment. So in terms of direct next steps, I suppose it's quite hard to say, and it'll depend on the outcomes of some of these political changes. But, this market support is needed to get these off the ground.
I think it's really important to note if we can get some of these policy pieces right, it's not just good for the hydrogen sector, it's good for other sectors as well that are going through evolutionary. How quickly can we update policies and regulatory environments? It affects building green buildings, how we clean and move fresh water, how we build new energy infrastructure, how we make sure all the right stakeholders are at the table while all these projects are being deployed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just innovation and technology, it's innovation and permitting and regulatory processes and,
all the fun things that I tap out on. Yeah.
In order to get those policy and regulatory pieces right, it all comes back to everyone on the value chain being properly informed about how the technology works and the roles they can play in its adoption.
Are there specific things that municipal governments can do? I know we've done sort of a Metro Vancouver report as well in terms of supply and demand mapping and where we can maybe have some hydrogen hubs and things like that. What can municipalities and small businesses do as well?
Yeah, so I think, at a minimum, making sure everyone understands the hydrogen basics is really important so that, when you come into conversations, when you're out in the network, you can come prepared and able to communicate at a level playing field. Foresight's YouTube channel has some hydrogen-focused educational webinars on there that people can check out. I know the Canadian Hydrogen Association also has a lot of great resources, so preparing yourself and making sure you understand the basics is really important. And then just getting out there in the network, attending events, conferences, workshops, roundtable discussions, and other networking opportunities to learn from and meet other players in the sector to get involved is really important. And it comes down to, through that, learning what role your group plays in accelerating the hydrogen economy and learning what actions from your groups, whether you're a municipality or a small business, what's needed from you. And so, as you mentioned, we do have our hub reports. They have specific recommendations for each group with respect to all areas of hub development. So I'd encourage those interested to check them out. There's things like establishing a regulatory task force between several different groups to be able to sort out these regulatory barriers.
For innovators like Norm, getting the policy language right is essential for hydrogen success.
So on the municipal level, most municipalities have some kind of official community plan, and we tend to study those so we understand where the community mindset is on climate initiatives, right? And, updating those official community plans to include language like hydrogen would be helpful. When it gets a bit more boots on the ground, the development phase of the project. And for gas stations, there's a land use designation and it talks about gasoline, it talks about diesel, it talks about propane, it might even talk about natural gas, but it doesn't talk about hydrogen. And the staff at the planning level, they only can work within the letter of the law. So what's written in their bylaws is what they have to abide by. And if hydrogen doesn't find its way in there, then we run into a lot of negotiation, a lot of educating, and it's okay. We don't mind doing it. We're happy to do it. But if the municipalities could update their local planning bylaws and their land use designation to include some discussion around hydrogen, it would make it so much easier for us to get through that first development stage, because it can take up to a year. At the provincial level, they've definitely come to the party. They've updated their codes and standards to include hydrogen. So we've got a much more reliable framework there. And that takes risk out of the equation for us, because now we know the rules, so we can play within the rules. And that's certainly an improvement.
Norm and his team are also ready to welcome private fleets to the promising world of hydrogen fuel.
When we talk about the businesses, honestly, I think that there's two things. One, they need to educate themselves, and we have certainly the ability to offer all kinds of services there, fleet transition plans. We can work with businesses so they understand the nuts and bolts and costs associated with doing that fleet transitioning. But I also think that we're demonstrating that it works, and we invite businesses to come and talk to us about that. Like it is an absolutely viable technology. It's being rolled out across the planet. And I think businesses just need to take a serious look at hydrogen as an option, because it's a viable option. Absolutely.
It's clear there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes to push hydrogen adoption forward. But what happens next? Foresight's research reports offer a snapshot into the future.
That I'm really excited about it is our venture to value chain reports, because it takes, it's almost like a summary of all the different technology providers that we've worked with or we've made connections with through different events and initiatives. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about these reports and what trends industry might want to be watching now or in the future.
We're seeing that BC continues to lead the country in hydrogen technologies. So, this is also our largest category across the value chain. So when you look at BC's transportation value chain, specifically, hydrogen is definitely the area where we have the most technologies and the most concentration of innovation happening. So this report's going to be launched this spring. So we're looking at around a May timeline, and hydrogen is later this year. So we'll be able to find some more concrete outcomes for the hydrogen one as we continue to develop the database and do the analysis on that one. We're also producing a series of sector export studies for BC, looking at our BC Net Zero Innovation Network cluster areas. So the transportation sector export study is currently in development. And what we're seeing is that there's growing potential international opportunities for BC's hydrogen and fuel cell expertise in markets like Germany, Singapore, South Korea, and the UK, plus more, and we expand on what these opportunities are, as well as provide some tips for ventures on market entry, in general, but also specific to these markets within the report. So if any venture is looking for support on how to start exporting, please stay tuned to our channels.
BC's leadership in the hydrogen space could set a powerful example for international markets, helping to spread clean tech across the globe. Meanwhile, Norm and the H-Tech team continue to focus on strengthening our hydrogen ecosystem here at home, with hopes of exporting their proven approach across Canada.
If we can make it work in BC, we can make it work in Alberta, we can make it work in Saskatchewan, we can make it work in Manitoba. We can scale up. We need to demonstrate that what we're doing works. We are doing that. It is working. And so we just need players to come to the table, partners to come to the table, the balance of the community to come to the table. And by community, I mean the whole country. Everyone needs to be on board and talk to your MPs, talk to your municipal councillors and have the conversation. Hey, what can we do in this place? We support what H-Tech's doing. Why don't we lower some hurdles in our province, in our city? I think that should be the message. We have something really good to offer. We have a really good solution to offer. And I think we're going to make the planet better.
Thank you to our guests, Norm Barmeier from H-Tech and Alyssa Kelly, Director of Research here at Foresight, for sharing their deep knowledge about hydrogen's potential as an alternative fuel.
In BC, we are so fortunate to have an organization like H-Tech who's willing to lead the charge, literally, with hydrogen as the path to decarbonize our transportation. It's incredible. A transition like this is an economic opportunity that everyone can learn to benefit from.
If I were to leave our listeners with a final aha moment for this episode, especially if you're someone with influence, funding, or passion to advance clean transportation, it's this. If knowledge gaps are keeping you from exploring alternative solutions, ask the questions. Innovation starts with curiosity, and our future depends on innovative new pathways. What is hydrogen? How can it decarbonize my transportation? And how can I start to look at adopting these solutions today? The answers are out there, and they just might open your eyes to new possibilities for a cleaner future. That's it for this season of Cleantech Forward. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow Foresight to keep up with our latest research, projects, and programs supporting clean technology and a more sustainable future economy.
Cleantech Forward is fueled by Foresight Canada's BC Net Zero Innovation Network, powered by Pacific Economic Development Canada and the Government of British Columbia. Learn more about how BC is driving the future of clean transportation at foresightcac.com/British Columbia. Cleantech Forward is an Everything Podcasts production, hosted by Jeanette Jackson and narrated by me, Tamara Stanners. Showrunner and writer, Jessica Graychick. Sound engineer, Jordan Wong. Executive producer, Jennifer Smith.
Another Everything Podcast production. Visit everythingpodcast.com, a division of Pattison Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast.